I want to widen this debate and put some big questions now and get in more guests who've done a lot of work on the ground. What is the real reason for the worsening air quality across India? What impact is this worsening air pollution having on citizens' lives, especially the health factor? What is the solution to India's air emergency? Can centre and state governments escape responsibility, and can they work together for once, for God's sake? And will air pollution ever become a major political issue in India? Joining me now is Vimlendu Jha. He's been working on the environment for years. Anumita Roy Chaudhary, Executive Director, the Centre for Science and Environment, joins me. Pawan Mulukutla is Executive Program Director, Integrated Transport, Clean Air and Hydrogen, WRI India. Dr. Vivek Nangia is VC and Head Pulmonology at Max Healthcare, one of the leading pulmonologists in the country. So I appreciate all of you joining us. Let's turn question by question, and I want to ask you all this. Why are our cities, Vimlendu Jha, so polluted? When I look at the numbers, and I'm going to put all those numbers, the worst polluted cities, some of them are in India, Noida, Greater Noida, Delhi, Manesar, Ghaziabad. But we're seeing this now increasing pollution levels across the country. Why?
So Radeep, I'm actually in Varanasi, and the government monitors are showing me 197, and the private monitors are showing me 356. In 1 hour it actually turned to 376. The entire area or entire country, by the way, 90% of India's air is poor, very poor, and NCR, of course, gets into severe and severe plus category in these 3-4 months. One of the reasons why we are one of the most polluted countries of the world, or most polluted cities of the world, actually are the list that you actually make of 100 most polluted cities of the world. We are, almost 75% of those cities belong to our country. Is because we do not prioritize. We've actually prioritized development so much. We haven't really looked at urban environment, or for that matter, rural environment. There's not even measurement. We don't even measure what rural India's AQI index is. And therefore, from industrialization to urbanization to really looking at our transport regime, we haven't prioritized public health as number one issue. We've only selectively looked at development parameters and GDP parameters as measuring the progress of a country. And we don't even relate to the fact that, imagine if there's a sick country and there's a rich country, these two can't go hand in hand. You can't have a rich nation, second most rich nation of the world, or third top, or whatever, 5 trillion or 10 trillion. And then if every second child actually has a stunted lung growth, what kind of a nation are we actually building?
I'm going to come to the health risk. You're saying lack of political will. We've never prioritized it. I'll come to the impact on health in a moment. But Anumita, the first big question I pose, why? Do we lay the blame solely on governments and say that they've been unaccountable, they've not prioritized it, there's no political will out there? Is that the sole reason, in your view, why this problem gets worse by the year?
It's very important to understand that why, and it's very clear. Now, the whole development trajectory right now and the urban growth that is happening, one, clearly because of the energy mix that is in our industry, in households, and in the transport sector. So we are urbanizing, we are motorizing, we are industrializing, when the quality of the fuel that we are using, the technology level of emission controls that we are applying are we are behind, we are lagging behind. The technology ladder, we are really far behind. And we are not quickly catching up with the best that is clean and going to give us the zero emission transition. That's one. Second, and in this, I would really like to say that while the industrial energy and the transport energy certainly requires very quick transition, but the biggest challenge in India today is the household energy, where you still have large number of poor households with no access to clean fuel, still burning solid fuels for cooking, for heating, and that's huge amount of pollution, which is an equity issue that's fouling up their health and also our environment. The second reason is the lack of circularity when we are growing as a consumers in cities. We are generating huge amount of waste today, but with no infrastructure to recover that waste, to segregate waste and then recover resource out of that waste. So the waste
Right.
that gets dumped, we burn that all the time. And the third is the whole mobility crisis. So we are urbanizing, growing, and therefore the need to travel is growing, but then there is no sustainable options for us. So basically the government is telling us that you self-organize your own mobility. You buy your car, you buy your two-wheeler, and I'm not going to invest in the public transport that you require. And then the
Okay.
fourth is the whole construction boom, right? What Dia was saying about in Mumbai, that everywhere, the whole construction boom that has taken off, making huge demand on material and mining. So just understand the complexity. It is just the development trajectory, and therefore the government who had to set the terms of that growth with the clean
Okay.
matrix.
So
That hasn't happened.
okay, so it seems at the end of the day, it's coming to the door of the government. Pavan Mulukutla, do you agree with that? Is it solely to be left at the door of the government? Is it that there hasn't been enough awareness all these years? Suddenly now, at least there is a conversation about it, which was not there for several years. Do we lay it purely at the door of the Environment Ministry for their inability to frame, let's say, a comprehensive policy for mobility, for example, work with transport across the country? Is that the problem, or is it that just there isn't enough awareness?
I think Rajdeep, it's both, right? We solely can't say that it's only government, because I totally agree. We need very strong regulations, we need very strong norms, and we have very poor execution strategy in place. But I think making people part of this, other day I was taking a taxi in Delhi, and I was just chatting with this driver, and sir, ये तो सर्दी का मौसम टाइप है, यहाँ पे तो माउंटेन जैसे लग रहा है, इतनी अच्छी मौसम है. Even the awareness there is so lacking that we really need to make this people as part of this campaign, this movement, because we are talking about growth, but how do we achieve the growth as a green growth? Totally echoing what Anumita was saying, right? We need to look sector by sector. We are aware that what's happening in emission by construction, in transport, in industry, in household, but where is the action? And the action
Now,
is a
who takes the
combination
action?
of
The courts, for example, we've seen the courts, for example, not being, many believe, take one step forward and then take one step back. We've had it with green crackers this year. Now, when I spoke to the former Chief Justice of India, he said, look, we can pass an order. Execution has to be with governments. We need the law enforcement agencies to ensure that our orders are complied with. Look at coastal regulations. You come to Goa now, coastal regulations have been violated in several parts of this country. So is it about the failure to execute the orders that may be set in place, that on paper everything is in place, but the execution is missing?
No, absolutely, Rajiv. I think we need very strong execution strategy. We need coordinated action between different departments. I think there has to be a incentive and penalties for department officers, because cannot be just left. We are talking a situation of emergency, and we have to work at a war footing level. This can't be just simply said that, okay, let it happen and we'll take action. I think we need accountability, but we also need to create buy-in with citizens, because if you don't make citizens and people part of this movement, I think we are going to lose this effort.
Okay.
Because you talk about efficiency standards, then there is a resistance saying that, okay, we still want to use vehicles with better fuel efficiency. So we really need to ensure that we create campaigns around people. We really ensure that there's strong regulations, but the enforcement
I'm going to
has
come
to
to
be in
solutions.
place.
I'm going to come to solutions in a moment. I'm going to also go to Dr. Nangia in a moment, because I want him to, in a way, almost frighten our audiences into believing what impact does foul air have on our lives. But Vimlendu, you raised your hand very quickly on this why factor. Let's settle it once and for all.
So,
We'll come to
Ravi, one of the
solutions
things that
later.
we've been talking about with regard to, citizenry and others, we need to understand one thing, that we can't have private solution to public problems. At the end of the day, when we know that almost 50% or 40 to 50% of ambient air quality or ambient air pollution of Delhi is because of mobility sector, which CSC's report itself said, I think perhaps last year or something, then you and I can't buy a DTC bus. If 15 power plants in 300 square kilometer radius don't follow the sulfur dioxide emission guidelines, then you and I can't do it. So we need to understand one thing, that rather than putting it on citizenry and citizenship, we need to ask those tough questions of people who we elect to be our custodian of our air. So why is our air bad? Rather than looking at many other factors, we need to look at the custodians of our air are irresponsible politicians who don't give any damn about our health, and linking environment not just as a romance and a Naxal issue, rather a public health issue. Because imagine, and I'm sure Dr. Saab will talk about it. So we need to, that's where I don't think we should
Okay, I take your point. I take your point. There is only so much that citizens can do. Ultimately, the buck must stop with those whom we elect. Do they really care about the lives of citizens? Which brings me to my next big question. What impact does it actually have on the lives of citizens? I'm putting certain facts out. Air pollution's impact on health. Dr. Vivek Nangia, Head Pulmonology, Max Healthcare, you tell us, how serious is the impact of this across this country? If we breathe foul air, what does it do to our lifespan, to our health?
So, Rajdeep, we've known about the air pollution and its impact on our health for many, many decades now. It was way back in 1950s when the most infamous London smog happened, where in just 4 days' time, there were about 12,000 deaths and a lakh of people falling sick because of the poor air quality around them. Now, as we have transitioned over the years, industrial revolution then and now in India, it is still continuing, I guess, as far as urbanization is concerned. In 2015, globally, there were about 9 million deaths. That is 1 in 6 deaths were accountable only because of the poor air quality, because of the air pollution. This was times.
Repeat those figures for us, Doctor. Repeat those figures.
So in 2015, globally, there were 9 million deaths. That is 1 in 6 death, which was attributed to the poor air quality. And this figure is actually 3 times higher than the total number of deaths caused by AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis all put together. So that means we have a national program for TB, AIDS, as well as for malaria in our country. But unfortunately, for poor air quality, we have no national program at all. According to the 2019 figure, there were 1.6 million deaths in India alone because of air pollution. And in 2023, they have labeled it as the second highest risk factor to human life for adults after the high blood pressure, and in children after malnutrition. So again, for malnutrition, there's a national program, but for air quality, we have no national program yet.
So what does it do? It shortens lives, affects your lung. What does it actually do?
Overall, if you see, there are studies which have shown that overall in our country, the life expectancy has gone down by 5 years because of air pollution. In Delhi itself, Delhi NCR alone, the life expectancy has been reduced by 11.9 years. And this is a scientific study which was published in 2023. So we've known about it for years. So what happens actually is, especially the PM 2.5 particle and a smaller size particle is the particle which actually goes directly into your lungs. From the lungs into the bloodstream, it triggers off an inflammatory cascade, which then travels to the various parts of the body, which include your heart, your brain, your kidneys, your joints, your pancreas. So now we are getting to see so many diseases that are getting linked to the air pollution, starting from...
And this is across, and this is children, infants, as well as senior citizens, presumably, all of them breathing that same air. So they're all equally affected. Am I correct?
So right from the time when the child is still in a womb, in a pregnant ladies are more vulnerable to developing problems because of air pollution. A child who's not born could have poor lung functions. It could be an intrauterine growth retardation, premature births, premature deaths. Then as the child starts to grow, they start developing asthma at a very early stage. There's a study which has shown that 40% of the children from Delhi NCR had poorer lung functions or impaired lung functions as compared to children in southern India. Of course, southern India study was also not very good. The functions were poor there as well, but in Delhi, they were certainly worse.
No,
then
you're almost making all of us say, let's leave the national capital, find other places to live. I'm glad that you're shocking us, because the only way at times that people will realize what will force more accountability from their government is when they are alarmed by some of the numbers that you've thrown. I'm going to come back to you, Doctor, in a moment, but I want to then raise solutions. Let's be very clear. We know the problems. Let's start one solution after the other. Anumita, you've done a lot of work on mobility. The government now, only the other day said they are going to create, incentivize people to move to e-vehicles. They believe that the EV revolution is here. Do you believe it's here? Because I keep hearing mixed signals on that. And how do you incentivize people to move to EVs?
So
Or is it just a nice statement to make?
No, so electrification and zero tailpipe emission is certainly the way to go. But what has happened so far, so as of today, Government of India has come up with several incentive programs, demand incentive programs, to give incentive to people to buy EVs. And that has really been the prime focus of building the market. But even after 5 years now, if you look at the overall electrification in the country, then it's just about 5% of the new vehicle sales. And if you are in Delhi, then it's a little better. It is about 13%. But now at this crossroad, when the EV market has begun to take off, still very nascent, but what will really be the game changer is not so much the reliance on demand incentive, because that is unaffordable for most governments. They can't keep on giving incentive year after year. But what will really stimulate the market is to have a very strong regulatory mandate, standards, and infrastructure. So, in fact, today, what is very interesting, that the personal car market, if you look at it, it has begun to electrify without incentive, because incentives, and rightly so, are given for public transport, for buses, for commercial vehicles, and for the local paratransit. So therefore, what we are really looking for is that how do you speed up? Now, there are a lot of
Because there's
policy,
still a fraction. Correct me if I'm wrong.
very
The
small
EV
fraction.
is a small fraction. I mean,
Yes.
when I look at the numbers, vehicular emissions account for 39% of what makes Delhi choke, according to one figure.
Exactly.
And most of the, and a small fraction are EVs. So, I mean, it's going to take years for us to resolve, to tackle the problem of vehicular emissions.
But if you, Rajdeep, if you recall our experience with CNG in Delhi, when a very clear mandate and a timeline was given that within 3 years, all buses and local commercial vehicles will have to move to CNG. And that happened, even when the country was not producing a single
Right.
CNG bus then. We need to recreate that kind of a strategy. That how do you drive and accelerate? And there's several levers. You can have fuel efficiency standards that will demand electrification. You require infrastructure, public charging infrastructure, and home charging facilities. And you need to support the whole other transit, the several mechanisms that are in place today. But we need the intent, we need the will to do that.
When I look
Even
at,
for
when
those-
when you all keep saying will, I just look at some of the numbers. A parliamentary panel found that 858 crores allocated for pollution control in the 2024-25 budget was unutilized due to delays in approval from the Union Environment Ministry. Now, when I look at those numbers, that's where the will comes from. Are you going to prioritize this issue? Pawan, every year in November, I hear farmers of Punjab being blamed. The stubble burning. Unki wajah se ho raha hai. Then when I look at the actual numbers, it shows that farm fires account for about 4% of what makes a city choke. Far higher vehicular emissions, industrial pollution, and dust. These are the top three. And yet I don't hear enough spoken about them. Do you believe we also need to recognize there needs to be a realization? Yes, you need to tackle the problem of farm fires, surely, stubble burning at the time. But is that where your attention should be when you look at solving the problems?
Rajdeep, I will say I think we need to move away from our obsession for short-term measures, right? And I think what we need right now, specifically in NCR, is a 5-year action plan with specific measurable targets sector wise, because I think without a target that what we are going to reduce, how we are going to reduce is known, but I think what we are going to reduce time bound is very, very, very critical. So say we are talking about 20 in next 5 years, what we are going to do in transport sector, in industry sector, in in construction. I think we really have the numbers. What we have the solutions. What we need is the execution plan. And this, we have to hold different departments accountable across NCR. We need a coordinated action in sync, because we simply can't say that I'll just do only industrial, I'll not do transport. I think we clearly know what needs to happen sector by sector.
Can I,
We need the actors to really execute it.
can I look at an example, Vimlendu, which has been so successful, which is Beijing? It's always thrown as an example of what can be done. China got it right there. Beijing was one of the most polluted cities at the turn of the century, and eventually today they've licked the problem. But it is an authoritarian regime where you can enforce from the top. In India, that might be much more difficult. How do you drive this 5-year campaign, this clean air campaign in a country like India? Where would you start?
So I'll take from what Pawan and Anumita actually said. So you need to understand one thing. The first time that the Prime Minister's office actually intervened or made a statement with regard to air pollution was with regard to private vehicles and EVs. We need to understand one thing very, very clear. Private vehicles of one kind can't be replaced by private vehicles of another kind. If we really need to solve this problem, we will have to look at public transport. And that's where the problem is.
So what did China do? What did China do? What did tell our viewers? What did China do?
Rajdeep, China did exactly that in terms of Beijing. First of all, one of the things that they did, it actually strengthened its public transport infrastructure in this regime. Second thing that it did, which I mentioned earlier, the coal thermal power plants were actually moved out of the immediate periphery of Beijing. Third thing that it did, that the emissions, of course, we are talking about 7 to 8% or perhaps 10% emissions of Delhi NCR that happens from industries in that sense. They moved those industries outside the immediate periphery or so-called air catchment or airshed in that sense. So we need to look at that those harsh decisions, which of course came at the cost of the economy, were taken. So public transport, your thermal power plants, your emission, of course, construction and demolition dust and roadside dust wasn't such a big thing in this case study of Beijing that we're talking about. And also, one of the things that Beijing did very, very importantly, and that's the fundamental of air quality governance, is that it did not really get obsessed with symptoms. It actually went to the source. So, what we are actually looking at last 10 years of India's governance, or 10 or 15 or perhaps 20 years of air quality governance in India, we only look at symptoms and we only look at it from a period.
Give me an example.
October to Sorry?
Give me an example. When you say we look at symptoms
So for example, one of the things that we are actually doing right now, one of the things that we are actually doing in bad governance of air quality is data manipulation. So right now, for example, you are not wearing a mask. Perhaps you are in the studio. I'm not wearing a mask because I'm in Varanasi, where air quality is 357. In Noida, your air quality is 350. But we have normalized this 350 air quality, where countries like Thailand actually almost shut down at AQI of 200. So it's Changa C at 350, it's okay at 450, and if your private monitor is telling you 1200, it's still fine. So that's the problem that we're talking about. So now, in terms of where are we looking at only symptoms? Sprinkling water or cloud seeding. Imagine for 16 days, the headline management in terms of air quality governance was with regard to cloud seeding, where operation was successful, the patient died. In the sense, cloud seeding was successful, but rain didn't really happen. And there's no evidence from anywhere in the world where cloud seeding has actually worked. And imagine the 1,500 square kilometer area that we actually have of Delhi NCR, where 1 square kilometer costs almost 50 lakhs. How many such cloud seeding events? And the environment minister said he wants it every 2 days because Delhi's air quality is very poor, almost 200 days, which is every alternate day. So,
and when I interviewed him, he was almost celebrating when it went from very poor to poor, which clearly shows, as you said,
exactly.
that chalta hai.
So, and then imagine, I was there, Rajdeep, yesterday at Anand Vihar, where your air, and which is one of the most polluted areas, where the air quality monitor is under a tree, 20 meters from there is a voodoo machine endorsed by the Supreme Court called Smog Tower, and water sprinkled all through. And then the air quality is okay. And CAQM, so-called body and the only quasi judicial
So don't.
body. See, I was coughing in Gurgaon and coughing in Varanasi as well.
Okay, it's interesting. You've chosen to be in Varanasi, which is the Prime Minister's constituency, and you're coughing there. But Dr. Nangia, while we are getting the environmentalists to give us potential solutions, should there be now a massive public health awareness campaign as well? Because people need to know also the dangers of what's happening. Because one of the questions I'm posing is, what will it take for the environment to become a political issue? In a country like India, it's only at the end of the day, if there are votes to be had or lost on whether you care for the environment or don't care. Do you believe that's possible? A widespread public health awareness campaign of what poor air can do to our lives?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I fully agree with you. Now is the time when we have to have a mass movement that has to actually be in the form of public awareness about how air pollution is actually harming our lungs. Not only our lungs, but our entire health and reducing our lifespans as well. While we have been aware about it, but I think somewhere in the back of our minds, we tend to slip it very often. There are people who still come to us in the OPD saying, Doc, why should I quit smoking? As it is, we are breathing such bad air outside. So even if I continue smoking, how does it harm us? What they don't realize is that with every PM 2.5 particle size in the environment around 25 mics is equivalent to one cigarette in a day. So if the PM 2.5 concentration is around 200 plus, so 8 cigarettes, there you go completely. In a day, you breathe 8 cigarettes in a day. So, that is the kind of harm that we're doing to ourselves. Of course, the awareness is rising now, especially because what used to be called a silent invisible killer is now visible to us also. So we do see people talking about it, like earlier years when people would come to us during this time of the year with cough, cold, breathlessness, you would have to tell them that, it's because of the air pollution outside. Now, when they come to us saying that ever since the air quality has dropped, since then the symptoms started, or since Diwali, the symptoms have actually worsened. So the awareness is there, but I think it's a lack of will and I think they all need to be pushed a little to convert it into a mass movement.
As I end in the last couple of minutes, I want 30 seconds to each of you. What would it take, Anumita, to make this a political issue? I know all of you have done a lot of work on the environment for a long time, long before it became even fashionable to have shows like this on it. But what will it take? What will it take, according to you, to make this a political issue? A quick answer.
It's very clear. So while we need massive campaigns, awareness campaigns regarding the problem, but at the same time, I think we need even stronger campaign to build public understanding of the solution so that they can really make the political demand. We talk about air pollution and running away from Delhi, but when it comes to solutions, we don't create that much demand for, I want my public transport infrastructure to work when the government is giving me flyover after flyover. So it's very important to deepen the understanding because the solutions are getting increasingly complex. And we don't want middle-class environmentalism only, that I can be fine with my air purifier kind of solution. I need hard decision, difficult, inconvenient decision. For that to build public support to change the politics around the solutions is going to be very critical.
Because that's the issue that I often hear. And Pawan, you can take this, and then Vimlendu very quickly, that, this is a middle class environment, this is an upper middle class issue. That the poor have far too many issues of roti, kapda, makan, rozgar to worry about hawa. How do you respond to those who will tell you this, Pawan, that, that it doesn't make that much of a difference to the average person of this country?
Not at all, because they are the ones who are totally getting impacted, right? They don't have purifiers. They are the ones actually more exposed. So I would really say that they are actually more vulnerable to actually what is happening, what many of us are actually leaving them with the kind of quality of air. See, we need to make difficult choices. And this is where I say that solutions are going to be difficult choices, because maybe it will make certain class uncomfortable. And therefore, I think deepening that awareness with citizens and public in general would be so critical, because you're talking about regulations, about mandates, about the need to change behavior, and all this would maybe unpopular choices. But that's where I think creating not just understanding of the problem, but the solution is extremely important, because we need to make people part of the solution process, and that is where then they are able to ask,
Right.
sustainable solutions, right, to get clean air. So that's how I think we'll be able to really address this.
That's from clean air to clean water as well, because remember, many of the poor in particular are the worst, suffer the worst because of the kind of water that they end up drinking. But, Vimlendu, you're in the Prime Minister's constituency of Varanasi. I saw you the other day with Rahul Gandhi in a conversation. We need, this is an issue that should cut across the political divide. The idea should be that Mr. Gandhi and the Prime Minister should come together along with chief ministers from different parties and have a national policy for ensuring clean air. Do you agree with me when I say that this issue is not to be seen through a political lens?
Absolutely, Rajdeep. It should be every party's first point in their manifesto. And as you asked the last question, with regard to it affects the poor the most. It's not the same air that everyone breathes in Delhi. You need to understand that the air the Prime Minister breathes, or the air Rahul Gandhi breathes, or what you breathe, and what someone in Sangam Vihar breathes, or someone who is the sabzi seller on the street is breathing, is completely different. So one is that there's different air quality for different strata of people, and then there's also different access to healthcare for different strata of people. Because if Dr. Saab is right that it affects your lungs, if you have stunted lung growth, and if you're asthmatic and you have arthritis and this, that, and the other, then it means that it affects someone who's actually standing 8 hours at the traffic signal much, much more than with multiple air, tenders going around in Delhi government and central government of air purifiers. And our Chief Justice, I think it's very, very important for us to also, as I know that you had a fantastic interview with the previous CJI, but imagine for several hearings, he's realized that it wasn't important. Someone like a Chief Justice of India doesn't even know what AQI is. The current Chief Justice of India is saying that let's do work from home. How many people can actually do work from home, in the sense argue from home or do this virtual courtroom? Can a rickshawala or a DTC driver or a traffic cop or many people do work from home? So, when we look for solutions, we again look for solutions from a place of power and a different kind of equity and different kind of privilege.
I take your point. I hope that the current Chief Justice and the former Chief Justice are listening to you. We need real solutions, workable solutions, tangible solutions with a clear plan of action. For God's sake, let's create at least a 5-year plan so that we don't have to do these debates every year for an air emergency. We need a clear, transparent plan prepared. Hopefully that will be done. To all my panelists for joining me on our air emergency roundtable, thank you very much. I hope a day comes when you and I can actually breathe some clean air. And more than us, every citizen of this country. It must become a fundamental right, the right to breathe clean air. Let's start a movement right from here. For now, take care, stay well. Jai Hind, Namaskar.